So, good evening. Welcome to the IELTS speaking test. And today we'll be talking about education. So, we will start with part one. So, the first question is what is your favorite subject?
Well, I guess it must be physics because, ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated by this particular subject because it explains the way the world works, which is very good for me considering I always been a boy with an insatiably curious mind.
Mm. So, what do you find most challenging in your study?
Well, it really depends the on different subjects because I encounter various difficulties. But the one I face the most is my lack of concentration because generally when I study, a lot of the times I experience low motivation as I always sit in front of a blank page staring at it and having nothing on my mind, unable to begin to do anything. So with the slightest trigger, I may lose sight of what I'm doing and immediately get distracted by other factors. So
Mm.
that's kind of a challenging thing for me.
Okay, so what major will you study in university?
Well, I'm still pretty much clueless by this point, considering the direction I'm taking with my studies right now. I'm gearing towards either economic laws or foreign trade, even though my parents and my teachers are persuading me to pursue a more diplomatic path. But I still have a lot of time on my hands to decide on where this will lead. So I guess it's not fixed yet, and it might change in the future.
Mm. So we move on to part two, and this time I'll ask you to describe a period of time in your studies that was the most difficult for you. And you should cover these questions, which are when it was, why it was it hard, and what you were doing at that time, and whether you felt you were successful in overcoming the difficulties. So I'll give you 1 minute of preparation and you can make some notes if you wish.
Okay.
Okay, so
Uh,
your speech starts now.
well, I get the most difficult time in my studies that I've ever experienced was in the seventh grade when I had to undertake the final math examination. And even though I don't have much difficulty with the subject by now, seventh grade was the time that I found myself falling behind in terms of both grades and my levels of understanding in general. I guess I could attribute this issue to my growing interest at the time in other extracurricular activities, which I spent too much time on instead of, spending more time and effort on learning. So I pretty much neglected it most of the time at that particular period. And when my mother saw me struggling, she did try everything in her ability to provide me with the assistance I need. So that means that I was made to attend several extra classes and, which helps me swat up on my mathematic skills. That was a very a very, uh hard for me mentally speaking to say the least because I just my anxiety just accelerated knowing the immense pressure I was under. And if I just failed at this test, I might, the future, my whole future might be sabotaged. And the massive workload doesn't really help either. So over time I actually got better, and in the end I did perform pretty well at the test, scoring around 80%. Well, approximately that if my memory serves me right, but it's still enough for me to pass the test with flying colors. Well, even though it is successful, that period of time was pretty much a nightmare for me. and something I will not remember very fondly in the future, I guess. So that's that.
Mm. Okay, so let's move on to part three, and I'll be asking you questions that are related to part two. So the first one is how are education priorities today different from those in the past?
Well, I guess the main difference is a greater emphasis on the development of soft skills and interpersonal qualities. You know,
Mm.
in the past, students they usually got in and they conducted their studying and taking whatever is taught was taught at school, and that's the whole process. You don't get pretty much anything else. But nowadays, I think schools have recognized the need for a more practical kind of education, as it is gearing towards teaching their students how to hone skills and utilize them effectively in any social settings or working environments in the future. So that's a more long-term process, and it helps them a lot in the long run.
Mm. So what problems are there in schools' curriculum today?
Well, as progressive as our educational program is getting, I still have some issues with the way it works, and a problem in it, which is I would like to call inauthentic learning because of its over reliance on memorization and rote learning. And to clarify, I have witnessed students nowadays are constantly told what to do, what to study, how to do this, how to do that, to name but a few. And knowledge has no real or long-term values, and it eventually becomes meaningless in the end, which is kind of pointless in my opinion. And another is the enormous workload that is the nuts and bolts of every subject. And new content is added onto the curriculum all the time without leaving any space for the students to properly process all the information. And it causes information overload, which is not good.
Okay,
So,
so last question. How well do you think schools should prepare young people for working life?
uh, well, that is a very tricky question because in my opinion, you know, no schools, no person, nobody can truly prepare for the youngster to enter the working life because it is something that they have to eventually figure out for themselves. But the best schools can do is instilling the most common skill set into their students' mindset. And a case in point is critical thinking and problem solving skill, because students will obviously need these qualities a lot as they enable them to overcome any problems or trouble that they may have to, sooner or later encounter throughout their working life. So that's my answer.
Okay, so that concludes our speaking test. So thank you for attending.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome to the IELTS speaking test, and today we're gonna be talking about education. So let's move to part one. Now, question number one: what is your favorite subject?
So my favorite subject is actually my major, which is English, and I am very into it because I feel like there's always a lot to learn, and with fluent English, you can travel around the world and make new friends seamlessly without language barriers, and I suppose that being a conversational in English or multilingual in general just makes life a lot easier.
Okay. What do you find most challenging in your study?
So personally, the most troublesome subject for me is literature, and I know the subject is really essential, but I'm just really like terrible at it, and because there are several reasons, and I'm kind of a inarticulate person, generally not very good with words. So most of the time when I have to analyze for example, a poem or a just a literary work, my speech or writing is bound to be somewhat very corny and very starchy.
Okay. What major will you study in university?
So I think after I graduate high school, I really gravitate towards business administration as um, I would take it as my major, and there are several reasons. So, when studying business administration, the skills and knowledge you gain do not really come from books only. So, when you learn theories, you also learn how to put them into practice, how to you also learn how to put them into practice. And a degree in business administration also offers great flexibility and also a lot of job opportunities like finance, accounting, management, human resources, marketing, and a lot more.
Well, okay, then now let's move on to part two, where you will describe a period of time in your studies that was the most difficult for you. And you, in your speaking, you should say when it was, why was it hard, and what you were doing at the time, and whether you felt you were successful in overcoming the difficulties. Now you will have 1 minute to prepare your speech, and I will let you know when it's over. Okay,
Okay,
bạn này cắt
let's
này.
start right away. Okay.
Okay. Okay, now you shall begin.
Okay, so during my studies, the most challenging periods for me personally is just basically every exam season ever in secondary school and high school. So this could be any time towards the end of the semester or academic year when like numerous exams and assignments are due simultaneously, and it's really it's always very challenging because of the immense pressure, time constraints, and the the need to grasp to process a vast amount of information in such a short period. And at that time, I was just doing what I was supposed to do, like spending long hours studying, trying to balance between different subjects, dealing with stress, with pressure, and sometimes feeling really overwhelmed by the workload. It was both it was both, I would say, very mentally and physically exhausting. So, mm, however, despite the challenges, despite the hardship, I kind of succeeded in overcoming these difficulties by just staying organized, just staying systematic, uh, seeking support from my friends, my peers, and my parents, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, temporarily refraining from my hobbies so I had more time to study while still getting enough rest. So just ultimately the experience can be very rewarding once the exams are over and results are achieved. And after the exams, I would say in secondary school, I did pretty good and I passed all the exams with flying colors. And in high school, I would say my results are satisfactory.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move to part three. How are education priorities today different from those in the past?
Hmm. So that's a very interesting question. So I think education priorities today have shifted in several ways compared to the past. So today I feel like there is a stronger emphasis on skills for the future job market, such as critical thinking, yeah, and creativity, problem solving, and we also get to improve our digital literacy as well. And so STEM subjects, which stand for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they are also gaining more importance due to the demand for these skills in the workforce.
Okay. What problems are there in school's curriculum today?
So from my personal experience, in terms of problems in schools curriculum today, right in Vietnam, very common issue in the Vietnamese national curriculum is the lack of adaptability, I say, to the rapidly changing world and job market. And a lot of people in Vietnam argue that the curriculums can be way too rigid and way too outmoded, not adequately preparing students for the modern world. And people are also concerned about the overemphasis on the standardized testing system, which may limit autonomy, creativity, and critical thinking skills.
Okay. Now the final question. How well do you think schools should prepare young people for working life?
So, in terms of gearing young people for the working life, I feel like schools they should take charge to strike a balance between academic knowledge and practical knowledge. So what they could do is to incorporate real world scenarios, leadership or vocational training, mm, because I feel like that can better gear students for the expectations of the workforce. And also, soft skills such as communication, teamwork, and adaptability are also very crucial for the success in the job market. And they should definitely be integrated into education. And in a nutshell, schools just play a really vital role in preparing young people for working life by providing a an all-rounded education that goes beyond the traditional academics.
Okay, so that concludes our IELTS speaking test today. So thank you.